Good morning, Juliet.
Morning, Simon. How are you?
Very well, very well. It would be remiss of us not to start the conversation with some sort of weather reference, surely.
Only a hard frost here.
3 inches already this morning. They're here.
That's
Um,
a white covering, isn't it then?
it
Mm.
is. And welcome to everyone uh, grabbing your hot chocolate or your coffee in the UK. And congratulations for still having power. Nestle in for the next hour or so, where we will be discussing everything around protecting your workplace and sexual harassment prevention. But lovely to see you again, Juliet.
And you, Simon.
Fantastic. Okay. So this is a catch up. This is a summary. This is a highlight again of topics that have consumed the diary over the last, I would say, certainly 2 months for us in particular, in terms of rolling out the training for the new sexual harassment prevention training. This is going to last an hour, as we mentioned, and there's going to be a bit of a different format. We're going to heavy load the front with insight from Juliet Price, Park City Consulting. We'll come on to your introduction in a second. Many will know you already. Park City are mutual clients of ours, an amazing organisation. And then the second half is going to be a question and answer. It's going to be Q&A. And that's really down to the amount of questions that we had last time, that we tried to get back to everyone. And this will be recorded. The conversation will be sent out to you as well. But if you have any questions, that will be the second half an hour for you to get those questions in. So a live Q&A on new sexual harassment protection for employers. I think we're 2 minutes in or 3 minutes in. Shall we kick off, Juliet?
Certainly.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks, Simon. Thank you so much for inviting me. Do you want me to dive
Oh,
straight in,
absolutely.
or shall I dive?
Have an introduction into who you are. Many
Brilliant.
will know you already, but tell us who Juliet Price is and Park City Consulting.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Simon. Thanks for inviting me today as well. Really enjoy these webinars with you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Juliet Price. I've been in HR and employment law for over 30 years now. And 27 years ago, I founded Park City Consulting. Park City's purpose is really to partner with organisations like yours, small businesses, medium businesses, and larger corporates. And we really are the champion for the business owner and the senior leaders, senior managers in the organisation, because we support them to manage and develop their HR function, their health and safety compliance, and also improving their leadership and management skills within the organisation, really giving back the control to the board and the management team, and the confidence that they've got a happy and healthy work environment where their people really thrive. And importantly, the business, of course, delivers the results for its shareholders. And obviously today we're going to be focusing on the prevention of sexual harassment, what you need to know about that, and the changes to the Equality Act. So if we could move on to the next slide, if that's possible, please. Okay, Simon, did you want to introduce Wellity?
Yeah, and really just to say, agree with everything that Juliet said, a wonderful organisation, and we are very proud to partner, not just on these webinars, but in business as well. Terrific. So who am I? I suppose, well, if you don't know me, my name's Simon Scott Nelson. I'm one of the co-founders of Wellity Global. And Wellity Global are a trusted workplace training provider. We work very much in the UK with SMEs, public sector, and the large corporates, and also across 80 different countries. We've got around 450 different titles, as you see there, ranging everything from leadership, EDI, neurodiversity, mental health, even phone addiction, burnout, and high performance, with around 200 accredited facilitators. So everything, including as well sexual harassment prevention training, which is being fully rolled out. At the moment, there's a selection of our clients along the bottom there, if you needed any peace of mind. And what I will say is that these webinars are amazing, and it would be great to know you all more on a one-to-one basis and understand your organization and your organizational needs. So up on that slide there, if I'm pointing to my left, that's where my left slide is. We've got our email address, which is hello@wellityglobal.com. We've got our phone number, and we've got the internet. There is also, throughout this webinar, an offer on training. Buy one training, get the second one half price. This is only available up till the end of November. But if you do scan that QR code, if you're tech savvy, get your camera out, scan the QR code, that will get you through to our Calendly page, and I or the team would be absolutely delighted to meet with you 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it might be, just to discuss your responsibilities and what you would like to cover, any challenges or pinch points you've got. Okay, Juliet.
Brilliant. Thanks, Simon. Okay, so we are going to have a look at the Worker Protection Amendment of the Equality Act. So as you all know, this is a recap for you. As you know, this came in on the 26th of October. So you really do this year. So you really do need to take action if you haven't already before, of course, an employee raises a claim at tribunal. So under the Equality Act, sexual harassment is unlawful. Okay, now sexual harassment is when a person is subjected to unwanted conduct of a sexual nature. For example, displaying pornographic screensavers or telling jokes of a sexual nature in the office. And where this has the cause or the effect of violating that person's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for them. Now, this is whether it was intended to do so or not. So if the intention was just a joke on the part of the person doing the behaviour, that's irrelevant if the person on the receiving end feels that it's humiliating or degrading, then that is sexual harassment. So the unwanted conduct doesn't have to be sexually motivated, okay? And it's up to the individual on the receiving end of the conduct to decide if it was sexual harassment. And just because someone doesn't challenge the behaviour doesn't mean that they're accepting it. So this legislation change in October, it introduced a specific proactive statutory duty, okay, on employers to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment of their employees and workers during the course of their work. Now, this applies to employees, workers, job applicants, contract workers. The only people that are not covered by this change in legislation are the genuinely self-employed, okay? Now, it also includes while they're at work, while they're off-site working. So, for example, they could be at a client, a supplier site, at a conference, attending a training course. They could be at a work party. Now, we're coming up to Christmas and we're coming up to work party season. So this is really timely today. Now, since October, if an employee thinks that they've been sexually harassed at work, then the employee is able to make a complaint directly to the Equality and Human Rights Commission. This is as well as potentially raising a claim at tribunal. So this is new. So they don't have to first have complained to their employer. They can skip that and go straight to the Equality and Human Rights Commission, who will potentially support that employee through their claim. If the employer has failed to take all reasonable steps, then the Equality and Human Rights Commission can take enforcement steps against the employer. And it also means that employers must be able to explain and provide proof of the reasonable steps that they've taken to prevent sexual harassment of their employees. So really important to keep records of every step that you take. If that wasn't enough, then as well, employment tribunals have the opportunity to, or the power, should I say, to uplift any successful claim at tribunal by 25% if the employer is found to have breached this new duty. So this could be extremely costly for employers in monetary terms, let alone reputational. Now, let's bear in mind, let's think about this in terms of who could be sexually harassed, because it could be people of any gender orientation, any identity, any gender identity, any sexual orientation, men, women, anyone in the workplace. And it can be a one-off incident, or it could be a culture throughout the organization. You know, what people used to call banter. You know, so this might include flirting, gestures, sexual remarks, comments about what someone's wearing, you know, their clothes, how they appear. And, you know, it could even be gestures that make someone feel really uncomfortable. So, you know, it's not just the obvious things like the displaying of pornographic material or making sexually offensive comments or jokes. You know, and with social media, with tablets and smart mobile phones in the office environment, you know, we really have to be on this and be aware of what it means and how we can protect our organisation and our people. Let's, you know, just think of an example. So Mike, he's in the office, he makes a sexual comment about Jane's body, saying she looks really great in that dress. Getting closer to her, rests his hand on her arm. Jane feels really uncomfortable at that point and intimidated. This is sexual harassment. So it doesn't have to have gone any further than that. And obviously Jane's next steps could be a grievance that then the organisation needs to manage, or of course a claim at the EHRC. Let's have a look at the action that you need to take. Okay, so we've covered all of those elements. Let's look on the next slide, please, at what action you need to take. So the Equality and Human Rights Commission I've mentioned, they're really front and centre on this topic of sexual harassment. And we'll come on to some points about that, because they've issued some guidance. They've issued, it was a 7-step plan. They've now upgraded it to an 8-step plan. We've got all the details. Contact Park City. There's a QR code at the end. We'll send you a complete guide on this. But the plan really details those 8 steps and what you need to do to protect your workers, your employees, and your organisation. Now, remember that the first step is your policies. So have a look through your company handbook. If you haven't got a company handbook, get in touch straight away. We need to write you some handbook policies, but you need to have a look at your policies because quite a number of them will need updating. They should define what sexual harassment is, give examples, everyday working examples, and outline everyone in the organisation's responsibility for preventing and tackling it, and confirm that your organisation has a zero tolerance approach to this. Training managers, as Simon mentioned, you can contact Wellity for lots of training programs on this as preventative measures, but also make sure that your policies are communicated all the way through the life cycle. So at the recruitment phase, through the recruitment phase, regularly through induction and onboarding, and keep repeating throughout your reviews with your people. Step 2 is a risk assessment. Okay, so these risk assessments will be different depending on the type of organisation you're in and the size of the organisation that you're in. Okay, contact us. We've got templates and suggestions, and we can advise you on how to go about those risk assessments. But I would advise to start with perhaps some form of staff survey. Talk to your people, find out what they're experiencing. Don't just do the survey as a one-off. Maybe every 6 months, just to keep in touch. How are things going? What's happening? Tell us how you're feeling. And then those risk assessments can look at things like the volume of people in a particular gender. Age groups can have a big impact on this. So have a look at your risk assessment and look at what practical steps you can take, you know, to protect your people and your organisation. Okay, so let's look at step 3 then. So accessing and taking steps to reduce the risks in the workplace. So conducting the risk assessment we've talked about, do an audit of the current position of the business, look at any complaints that you've already had, keep a record of all complaints and follow up actions. Then look at reporting. So how are you going to report on it? So creating and updating a reporting register for all harassment complaints and concerns. Keep accurate records of the measures you've taken, as I've said, and then look at training to build awareness. Starting at the top, please don't forget the C-suite in this. Remember the board of directors. Leadership actions have a big impact and filter throughout the culture of the organisation. So do ensure that everyone in the organisation has the opportunity to be involved in some training on this so that they understand what's okay and what's not okay. In terms of the behaviours and how we go about acting in the workplace. Making sure that you give witnesses the tools and the means to intervene when something happens, and appoint training representatives. That's always a good idea, to have buddies, ambassadors, people that can support people in the organisation to speak up. And, you know, these people really are different to your mental health ambassadors. You know, these people require a slightly different skill set. Having a think as well, step 6, making sure that staff know what to do when a harassment complaint is made. So ensuring that there's a clear pathway for reporting the complaint. You know, obviously using technology that you've got, you might have software that you can record things on, keep obviously a secure and, you know, private record so that it's not open for people to read, you know, and ensuring that all complaints are investigated really thoroughly and that staff feel safe in making their complaint. Thinking about third parties now, we do need to think about third parties. So dealing with third parties, this is covered in the EHRC guidance. So although it doesn't become mandatory potentially until 2026, the third party element, because the EHRC have included it in their guidance, it's important that you include it in your steps now. So when we're talking about third parties, we're talking about your customers, your clients, your suppliers, protecting your workers from any sexual harassment from those people, customers, suppliers, and you know, third parties that you deal with. So making sure that when you're dealing with those third parties, that you're communicating your policy, you're communicating to them that you have a zero tolerance of this sort of behaviour, and that all the organisations you deal with understand your policy on this. Okay. Monitoring and review as well is really, really important. So that is step 8. So monitor the gender diversity of your workforce at every level, including for recruitment and promotion. And this will help you to highlight any potential discrimination or harassment on the grounds of you know, sexual harassment or even gender. Again, as I said, do staff attitude surveys. This will really, really help. A small recap on the risks. So on the next slide, please, what happens if you take no action? What are the risks? Well, obviously you'll have an increased liability and the potential for tribunal claims and the potential for an intervention by the EHRC. And that means they can take action against your organisation, an enforcement action to force you to take certain steps. You'll have significant compensation costs. We've already said there's a 25% uplift from the tribunal. There's the damage to your reputation. You know, clearly if that got out, you know, potentially customers wouldn't deal with you, suppliers might not be able to deal with you, etc. and so on. Obviously, there's a huge risk to having outdated policies. You know, clearly this is going to create a situation where in the organisation, the behaviours of the managers, you know, are just not going to be up to date and then therefore potentially cause grievances and claims at tribunal. And of course, grievances, this is a big what we want to do is prevent that at every step for you, because grievances take a lot of management time to investigate thoroughly, handle and manage, and we want to avoid them. And obviously having good policies and training your managers are all preventative steps. Okay, so finally, there's a QR code, a couple of QR codes on the next slide. So do get in touch with Park City. Scan the top QR code to download your free guide. That gives you not only the HRC 8 steps, but also practical guidance on how to comply with those steps. And of course, anti-harassment training. This is really aimed at managers and directors, and making sure whoever you select for this training, that they are bespoking it for your organisation, because it has been made clear in the legislation that doing general training won't be enough to have covered the reasonable steps. So the training needs to be bespoke to your organisation. So if you're in hospitality, it needs to be bespoke to that sector. So please do make sure that you cover that. And of course, we've said before, is it a defence for an employer to say, well, it was only a joke, it was only banter, the manager didn't mean it? Unfortunately, that is no defence anymore. Okay, so at tribunal, anything done by a person in the organisation is deemed to have been done by the employer in that sense. So, this is no defence. The only way an organisation can defend themselves from this claim is to have shown that they've covered all reasonable steps. Okay, and those are the steps that we've covered today and in the download. So do get in touch if you need support. I know that we're doing Q&A, so I'll hand obviously back to you, Simon.
Yes, we are doing Q&A, and there are 7 questions in. I know many people are on and joining today, so I know that number is going to increase as well, but 7, which we'll come to in a minute. Hot off the press, we have just reading there that research has come out that in the first 9 months of 2024, sexual harassment cases have surged as face new duties to prevent misconduct. 125 cases compared to 117 over the same period last year. People management have said that the rise in cases is likely to be the tip of the iceberg under the new Act. And Ben Wilmot, Head of Public Policy at CIPD, has highlighted a culture of dignity, respect and inclusion, which includes value-based leadership, effective training for line managers and robust procedures. So thank you for the nod on the harassment training as well. How can we help? Well, there are many different training provisions that Wellity are rolling out at the moment. If I click through them all there, because really what we're suggesting is that you're so correct with the C-suite alignment, getting the message to land at leadership level so that when rolled out, it's not just seen as another thing that's been done by HR, but managers play a pivotal role in maintaining a respectful workplace. And this one, Preventing Sexual Harassment, a Guide for Managers, identifies and addresses the sexual harassment effectively. Participants will delve into the understanding of the various forms of sexual harassment, learning how to recognize incidents with their teams, developing empathy towards those affected. And additionally, managers will learn the correct protocols for handling reports to ensure legal obligations and fulfill their managerial responsibilities. So that could be subtle and overt behaviours, as you alluded to as well, Juliet. Learn to identify signs of harassment amongst your team members, including less obvious indicators that might go unnoticed. And as Juliet says, for handling harassment reports, a fair and sensitive approach, organisational policies and legal requirements, exactly what Park City do there, and exploring the legal framework and getting strategies for zero tolerance towards sexual harassment. That's 2 hours, that one. And remember, when we are linking these up, there is that offer on today of buying one, which could be the managers, and getting one half price. That's usually aligned with preventing sexual harassment in the workplace for all employees as well. Approximately 40% of women and 18% of men experience unwanted sexual behavior. And that session there is designed to empower employees to recognize, prevent, and address sexual harassment through comprehensive education strategies and internal policies. That goes back to the point made by the CIPD of fostering a culture of respect, equality, and accountability where every individual feels safe. So that's what sexual harassment constitutes in its various forms, power dynamics, influencing harassment situations and how to navigate them, dispelling myths around harassment and which may hinder the reporting, feeling conscious about amplifying voices and allowing people to speak up, and developing the confidence to support victims. There's also preventing the sexual harassment in the workplace, e-learning, 1 hour, completely customizable, co-branded organizational policy, internal safeguarding and signposting so that everyone can see where you want to direct them to. That includes third-party harassment and virtual examples of harassment, including gender dynamics. There are a few more. We'll come on to those later in this session. There you go, there's the price there. What I will say is that there are those trainings. Now, those are the most comprehensive trainings that are being rolled out. I think there were 20-something meetings booked off the last session, and many of these training sessions have been rolled out, virtual or in person. There are many more trainings that coincide with them, such as Speak Up Champions, uncovering your blind spot, unconscious bias, and embracing a inclusive leadership team as well. But scan the QR code if you want to. That will take you to the book in a 30-minute meeting if you'd like. With any one of our team, we've actually got people specializing in this within the team now, just because of the numbers that are involved in rolling this out and the amount of meetings that we're doing. wellityglobal.com, you can download the full brochure of 450 different topics, and I would suggest that that's probably half of what Wellity Global do, because the other half is bespoke. But there is an offer. If you download that now, buy one, get the second one training. You can coordinate those sexual harassment prevention trainings or connect them to any others in the brochure. So scan that now and we will get back to you ASAP. Right. We have questions, Juliet.
Okay.
Shall we start from the top? Are there... Oh, there's 10 now. I'm growing. Are you ready?
I can't see them. Yeah, I can't see the questions, so you'll have to read them out.
Are there specific guidelines for mandatory sexual harassment training, prevention training, such as frequency or content focus?
It doesn't mention frequency. It does mention content focus, because it is quite clear that it needs to be, kind of doing a general course, and doing a general course once won't be enough. It does mention in the legislation that it needs to be specific to the organisation. So the type of organisation you run, the type of activities that your employees are involved in, and the type of issues that you have. If you've had complaints, build those scenarios into the training. So, it does need to be bespoke training. In terms of the frequency, everybody new and delivering it as frequently as you can, once a quarter, once every 6 months as refreshers, would be a really good thing.
Yeah, and the continuation of those with maybe Speak Up Champions, forming that community that they have as well moving forward, because as they face new challenges, those regular check-ins will be necessary. This is one for you. I don't think you need any prep on this. What are the best practices for updating workplace policies to align with new protections?
Okay, so having a look at the policies, there's quite a number of them you'll need to make sure that you review. So things like if you've got a harassment and bullying policy, for example, that would be definitely a good one to start with. Have a look at that and update it with specific sections on sexual harassment, defining it, what it is, saying the policy of the organisation, how you'll tackle any concerns around sexual harassment that occur from your employees, really set out a step-by-step process within the policy, and ensure that, or it's no good just having the policy gathering dust on the shelf. It needs to be part of the day-to-day behaviours of the employees and the workforce. So making sure that you bring it to life by involving employees in the policy itself and the procedure, making sure everybody understands it. So regular briefing sessions, posters up in the offices, posters up in your staff rooms or social areas, and making sure that you bring it to life through recruitment, induction, onboarding, and also in appraisal reviews. And constantly review your policies. You know, this isn't just a write a policy, leave it, you know, in the ring binder on the shelf or on the, you know, on your online shared document file. It's something that you need to be regularly reviewing, and obviously review it then in line. If you have any claims raised or any concerns raised, that's another time to review the policy again. How effective was our policy? How effective was our training? How effective is our awareness sessions? You know, so really have a look at that, and be open and share with employees, you know, how you're doing with your policy updates and amendments. But there are some specific steps that you need to take, and some specific things to have in your policies relating to sexual harassment. Get in touch. We can rewrite them and update them for you. So, you know, book a call with us and we can go through that in more detail.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the legislation makes it easier, doesn't it? It's an open door now to address topics which perhaps before people might have thought, well, who's done what? Why are we doing this? But now the legislation gives a really good sounding board and an open invitation. So now is the time to get this in. And actually, off the back of sexual harassment prevention training can come a whole lot of other, once people start speaking up, a whole lot of other training issues as well. Challenges and opportunities that come out of people being able to really speak up. And I agree with you 100%. It's about understanding it throughout the organization, isn't it? Really understanding what it is. And the new modern real definition of it as well, around memes, GIFs, internet, chat rooms, anything that makes people feel ostracized, or it's really about how that person feels. And that needs to be laboured, that point, really, doesn't it? That this is quite serious. There's a legislation out, and now is the time to act.
Definitely. Yeah. And it, you know, as we said before, the legislation says that it's a proactive statutory duty. So this isn't wait till you get a claim and have a look at it then. This is, you know, your duty as an employer is to be proactive, to take the steps and get the measures in place in your organisation. And now you need to be doing it now.
So let's, next question. Let's suggest that someone has noted this within the workplace. What are the recommended reporting mechanisms employers should implement to encourage employees to come forward?
Okay, so you might have any number of different ways that employees can do this. And, you know, there's no set, you know, I wouldn't suggest you have only one channel. I would suggest that you have a range of channels that employees can use. So, for example, an employee may feel comfortable having a one-to-one with their manager to tell them about their experience. But other people will want it to be completely anonymous, you know, and will want an anonymous way to send a message through. So you might have, you know, on your HR software, you might have somewhere that people can put forward an anonymous comment. It may be through a grievance. An employee can raise a grievance if it's quite serious and they feel it's quite serious and they want formal action to be taken. They would raise it as a formal grievance. And then obviously you've got your grievance policy and grievance process to follow. But there's any number of ways, you know, I don't think you should narrow it down to just, oh, if it's sexual harassment, you have to do this. Give employees as many opportunities as you can to be open about what's happening, and whichever channel they feel more comfortable using. Make sure that whoever's on the receiving end of those anonymous comments or claims, make sure that that person is trained in what the process steps are, so they understand how to receive the information, where they need to log it, and what each step is to investigate and potentially take action. So, that's the sort of process that you need written down so that everybody knows exactly what's happening.
Yeah, agree 100%. And underlying all this is the psychological safety necessary to be able to raise your hand, isn't it?
Yeah.
Without fear of retribution. And that goes part in with the training, that someone could feel that they can't step forward or they can't call out for one reason or another. And I think just addressing that, like you said at the start, the C-suite originally, with the managers, getting this as zero tolerance, and we are encouraging people, if they have any problems or issues, to report, that they feel safe enough and are supported then by their colleagues for doing so, and not obviously seen as part of the problem, but coming forward and be having those channels and safeguarding and signposting internally. There is a specific Wellity training on Speak Up Champions, where participants will learn to listen effectively, I think that's the word, really listen effectively to colleagues, promote internal protocols for speaking up, and encourage both bystanders and those directly affected by any form of disrespectful behaviour to come forward. So that is all about mastering active learning techniques to support colleagues, promoting internal protocols, and addressing safety issues and encouraging bystanders and people to speak up. Sometimes those awkward conversations need encouragement to be able to, and how to have them, how to start them. Yeah. Okay, next question. A very interesting one. How can employers balance confidentiality for both the accuser and the accused during an investigation?
Yeah, so obviously the person that's raising the issue is highly likely to want to remain anonymous, and that's okay. You can do an investigation, you can have separate meetings, obviously with the accuser and the accused, if you want to use those words, and you can do all of that in an anonymous way, making sure that your environment allows for that. So obviously, if you've got glass fronted meeting rooms where people can see you going in and out with different people, that might not be an environment that's ideally placed to have confidential conversations. So do think about where those meetings are going to take place so that you can protect the anonymity of both parties. And just making sure that you keep confidential all of the information. Again, if you have, secure files, or an HR software is the best place, because then that can be kept really confidential and safe. Keep the information confidential, and you don't need, the accuser doesn't have the right to be told who it is that's raised this concern. That's not the case. The case is that we discuss the behaviour that occurred, and we're then investigating that behaviour and talking to that person about it. And again, it's not a burden of proof. There's no burden of proof here, and there's no requirement for, on the other side, the person to prove that that they're innocent of this kind of thing. It's a conversation that goes on and an awareness raising exercise, and obviously you take them through the steps that are set out in your process, but making sure that all the files, all the information, all the meetings are kept confidential. And that can be done, but it does, depending on your office environment, it can take a little bit of planning.
Yeah, and far easier far more effective to prevent it than it happened. And also, if they have been given the training before, the training can revert, and the policies that you write can revert back to that in terms of your due diligence as an organization or as an employer.
Yes.
Okay, so once a risk assessment has been completed, they've consulted with you, etc., they've had some training, but once the risk assessment has been done, what do we do with it then? I know you alluded then to an HR file. What happens to it? Where does it go?
Yeah, good, really good point. And again, involve your workers and your employees in drafting the risk assessment. So get their involvement, maybe depending on the size of your organization, maybe put together a kind of focus group on this, of mixed ages, mixed genders, mixed identity people, put a focus group together and get them to write the risk assessment with some support and guidance. Because there is a kind of set process in how to draft the risk assessment. But then when that's been drafted, the really important thing to do is to share it and communicate it. So don't put it away and hide it away and then look at it again, dust it off in 12 months' time. Do share it. So at a team meeting, discuss that the risk assessment took place. These were the findings. These are the action steps that the organisation has confirmed they're going to take. And make sure that you're looking at any risks you feel your organisation has. You look to address them as far as possible. That might mean, having a look at when people are going off independently for meetings and things, having a look at those arrangements, having a look at who they're meeting with, the organisation, sharing and exchanging your policy with that organisation to make sure whoever they're going to meet with also has a anti-sexual harassment policy and that they're on top of this legislation. So, the risk assessment is something you do with your people. And you share with your people and you continue to review it. And each time you get a concern raised, you review it again. Okay, so it's a constant journey.
Yeah, and while the legislation is fresh in everyone's mind and a real point of entry into the boardroom or into the organization, this is legislation. It remains, it keeps it at, arm's length from people who are delivering it, makes it very easy in terms of the messaging as well. And we've also got, I agree with you, it has to go through the organization. There is an Active Allies training that Wellity runs, which helps people call out and amplify voices and be aware not just on sexual harassment prevention training, but all sorts of inappropriate behavior, anti-bullying, etc. But does give people others to go to Active Allies in the organization if they feel more comfortable to report it that way. This is all about getting ease of reporting. Okay, next one. We have so many left. We've got 17 minutes. Right, let's get through. We currently have a protection from harassment policy which covers sexual harassment as well as other forms of harassment. Would you suggest having a separate policy just covering sexual harassment alone? Great question. Thanks, Vanessa.
No, you don't have to have a completely separate policy. But I love the fact that you've got a prevention of harassment policy. That is brilliant. What I would say is make sure that you have a section in there to define really clearly the different types of harassment, including sexual harassment. Really spell it out what it is, and really spell out what action you'll take if someone raises a concern. Okay. And, really think about communicating it, working with your workforce to ensure that they've received a copy of the policy and they've read it and understood it. Important steps to keep the records of that as well. But it doesn't have to be a separate policy, but you do need to specify sexual harassment within your harassment policy.
Yeah. And in terms of the broader harassment, there is, I know there's a training session, I believe, called You're Prettier When You Smile, which tackles gender harassment and microaggressions in the workplace. As a recent survey found that 98% of women have been told to smile at work at some point in their lives by a superior. 15% say it happens weekly, and that goes into some of the microaggressions around tackling gender harassment as well. Right. What are the potential liabilities for employers if they fail to comply with these new protections? What is this all about? What happens legally in terms of next steps?
So this is if someone feels they've been sexually harassed in the workplace, I think, and then they raise a claim. So the risks to the organisation are, first of all, the employee can go to the Equality and Human Rights Commission. They can also raise a claim at tribunal, so they can still be an employee and raise a claim. They can go to ACAS as a starting point. And during those processes, the EHRC, Equality and Human Rights Commission, they can, if they find that the organisation hasn't taken reasonable steps to prevent the sexual harassment from taking place, the EHRC can take enforcement steps, so they can force the employer to then take steps. You also could be at risk of a tribunal, very costly, obviously from the employment tribunal perspective, harassment cases are very, very costly and usually quite high in terms of, the awards that are awarded to the employee against the employer. And with this change in legislation, tribunals are now able to uplift the award that they were going to give. If they feel the organisation hasn't taken the proactive steps, they can uplift that award to 25%, up to 25%. So, that's going to be very costly for the organisation. But, you've also got to think as well about the cost to reputation. What would that mean in terms of your ability to recruit the best people? What would that mean in terms of your ability to bid for contracts, to win new customers, to continue to serve your existing customers? They may feel that they're going to go elsewhere. So it's really important to have made sure that you've covered the proactive steps.
Absolutely. The next question, Juliet. What proactive measures can employees take to minimize the risk of sexual harassment claims? I'll start just from a training point of view with training, letting people know what it is, letting people know there is a legislation out there, letting people know what it is and why it is being written, and also suggest that the 2-hour training for managers, sexual harassment prevention training for managers immediately, that can be rolled out within 2 to 4 weeks. The all employees, that then goes a bit further to all employees to let them know what it is, what are the ramifications, what are their responsibilities as employees. Get those booked in. What else, Juliet? Proactive measures can employees take to minimize the risk of sexual harassment claims?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned forums earlier, get some forums going of a cross-section of your workforce to get them talking about the topic, get them to come up with ideas on how you can promote your policy and your process in how you'll manage these claims and cases. Again, being proactive to communicate with your people about what it is, how you can prevent it by changes in behavior and attitudes. Also think not only about visual displays in the office, but also things like sending a letter to your customers and your suppliers to let them know, that there'll be a zero tolerance approach to this. Talk to your suppliers as well. They interact with your people. That's a good way to get the message across. Get a forum group of managers together as well, so that they can talk both in we call them kind of town halls, where the manager can stand up and do a presentation to the employees, talk to the employees about what the concerns are and the issues are, and how to prevent it, what it is. In terms of the definition of it, what it looks like, and make sure that everyone's aware, raise awareness, really. So yeah, it's looking at all forms of communication, not just training, but raising awareness through all different forms of communication.
Completely agree. Talk about it. It's a topic, the sexual harassment is a topic that a lot of people haven't talked about in the past, but now with the legislation, it's an absolute open door. Talk about it and raise it. And I would suggest as well, just to add to that, lead loudly from the front with this and encourage. Right. What role do leaders and managers play in setting the tone for harassment-free workplace? Let's start with you.
So I think they need to be leading the set of behaviours first of all, don't they? You know, I was talking to an organisation a couple of months ago who said that, you know, actually, it's actually our leaders and managers who sort of behave, you know, in a way that sort of think this sort of thing is funny, and, you know, in a management team can sort of just treat it as a bit of banter and a bit of a laugh. You know, and actually starting with them to, you know, talk to them about the change in the legislation. You know, this isn't HR talking here. You know, we're only the voice of the legislation. The legislation is there. It's in place. We all need to comply with it. Every organisation, doesn't matter your size, you can have one employee, you know, and you've got this proactive duty. So it's so important to get the managers and leaders of the organisation on board first, you know, ensure that they understand what the behaviours are that aren't acceptable, and ensure that they're leading by example. So their behaviours need to set the tone. So they need to set the tone in their emails, in how they act when they're walking through the factory, through the hotel, through the office, whatever environment you have, making sure that they're setting the tone there with their own behaviours, and making sure that in team meetings, you know, they're leading it in the right way, in a professional way. You know, you can still be friendly, you can still have, you know, fun, but it's not fun to be having, you know, banter about, you know, these sorts of things, sexual things, because the legislation now is such that we've got that proactive duty, and it's really important, you know, that everybody understands what that means. So I would always advise, start with the C-suite, get them to lead the charge, you know, get them to initially communicate the policy, etc., with your people, and then enable managers and give them, you know, the power and the training and the knowledge and the confidence to implement the policies.
Yeah, role modeling is so important. I've actually I'm chairing a panel later on today about the importance of role modeling and leading by example. And people take a lot of information from how people are spoken to, referred to. That's emails, that's Slack channels, that's Teams, that's whatever it might be. And also one thing I would add is that, you know, 82% of managers are accidental at the moment. That's a fact. That's well out there and well advertised. They don't necessarily have the softer skills to be in that position that they have. I think that training is important because they might have the best will in the world to call someone out, but actually, if we go on to another one of the WellIT trainings, which is conflict and confrontation, managing difficult conversations. If you get to a point where you want to do that, but you're not quite sure about how to have those conversations or how to start them, or in what environment to do, or at what time of day, or wherever it is, then I think that can make managing conflict and keeping morale high very not easy. And during that session, you can get everyone in terms of boosting performance and increasing collaboration with the team, but through ways that you can have that first and initial conversation. What a great question coming up now. A bit of ambiguity here, Julia. How should employees handle situations where the line between inappropriate behaviour and harassment isn't clear?
Okay, so it's about how the person feels about it. So, you know, there isn't a clear line that says this is unacceptable, that isn't. It's about how the person feels that's on the receiving end of it. Now, it may not have been aimed at that person. So, for example, you might be in your office and behind you there's some sexual harassment happening. It's nothing to do with you, but you can hear it, see it, witness it, and you might be the person that raises the claim, or that raises the incident, you know, through the channels, because you felt uncomfortable about it. The person that was on the receiving end of it may not have felt uncomfortable, but if you do, this is where the legislation is clear. You know, you are able to raise that It wasn't aimed at you, but it doesn't have to be aimed at you. If you see something happening and you don't feel comfortable about it, bring it forward and discuss it. And the process needs to be followed. Then even if the person that it was aimed at doesn't mind and is perfectly comfortable with it, it's about creating the environment and taking all of the proactive steps to ensure that everybody understands that they are covered by this employer's proactive duty, and making sure that you follow your process when someone raises and says that I feel uncomfortable about this.
Exactly. That makes it clearer between intent and impact, doesn't it? Someone's intent might have been trying to be funny, trying to keep up with the group, trying to make themselves feel included, but actually the impact is to make someone completely demoralized and ostracized. Right. 8 questions left, 5 minutes. Quick fire on these, I think, Julia, as we build this up to a crescendo. How are these new protections being enforced, and are there examples of penalties for non-compliance?
Yes, lots of examples of penalties. I mean, obviously, there are inequality claims being raised all of the time through tribunal, but now we've got the proactive duty, so claims are going through the tribunal system now. And yeah, the costs are a potential 25% uplift. If you're found not to have taken the reasonable steps as an employer, you have no defence. That's it. The only way of defending yourself is by demonstrating, proving with record keeping that you've taken all the reasonable steps that you could be deemed to take.
Great. Is in-person training more effective than online training, or can online training meet the same standards? Well, we would say that online training, modern online training now, has all of the different components of training in terms of videos, YouTube clips, scenarios, etc., to allow, we would say with the managers, sexual harassment prevention training, often better in persons where they can get accountability amongst their colleagues, but that can be done online. But that we would say that is in person, although it can be done online. Smaller groups for accountability, cohorts, usually 15 to 20 on that. With the online as well, it gives a wonderful opportunity for people to feel safe. We talk about equity and in training, and it also allows people to have anonymous links to raise concerns, to ask those questions that they perhaps don't feel psychologically safe amongst other people, to hide their identity and raise those issues as well. So where it comes to all employees, we would say virtual, to really get under their skin and allow people the freedom to talk about a situation and ask those questions that perhaps they might not raise in public.
Absolutely agree.
What specific topics should be covered in sexual harassment training to ensure compliance in the new legal requirements? Basically, get a comprehensive understanding of what constitutes sexual harassment. I think that's been a growing theme throughout this. What is it in the modern way, including subtle and overt behaviours? Learn to identify signs of harassment amongst team members, including less obvious indicators. Step-by-step protocols, which Juliet has mentioned as well. Go to Park City, handling harassment reports, get engaged with the new legal framework as well. Safeguarding and signposting and reporting mechanisms and strategies to encourage respect, accountability, and really goes back to that proactive prevention. Anything else to add on that?
Get prepared for your Christmas parties. So make sure that you've got your policy and that you talk to all of your managers and your teams about the Christmas party, and ensure that everybody understands what's acceptable and, etc.
Definitely. How should sexual harassment prevention training be adapted for remote or hybrid workforces? Scan the QR code and let's talk. We can walk you through all those. Vanessa, we've rolled out bespoke sexual harassment prevention training to all managers and plan on rolling out e-learning to employees, which will be mandatory and required on an annual basis. E-learning is wider and covers, protects characteristics, bullying, etc. Should the training be specific to sexual harassment alone, or be okay as wider program?
I would suggest you need to do something specifically on sexual harassment.
Yes, agree. And if you're interested in the zero tolerance sexual harassment prevention e-learning, again, let us know. Should new hires undergo sexual harassment training? immediately upon starting, or is there a recommended time frame they should receive it? Great question.
Yeah, straight away. Yeah, and keep reinforcing.
Do we require a sexual harassment policy and an anti-bullying policy?
Well, you can have an anti-bullying policy, but it needs to be wider than bullying. So you need to have bullying and harassment. And then within harassment, you need to really specify sexual harassment, what it is, define it, and what steps will be taken.
Fantastic. And the last question was about signage around the office for suppliers and everything else. You said yes, and a big nod there. Love to hear your feedback on the slide. We're at time. Thank you, everyone. But thank you, Juliet. Honestly, a powerhouse of knowledge. We're very proud to partner with Park City and yourself. It's why I love these webinars, for the information that people gather. You will be sent out a recording. There's feedback slide there. Anything else to add before we go, Juliet?
Thank you, Simon. You're amazing. Great to see you. Great to partner with you as always.
Thank you so much. Completely reciprocated. Go to Park City, get all your strategies and policies in place, and let us know if we can help with any trading. Thank you, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure again.
Thanks, everyone.